the moderator and panelists for our book discussion. These Sorors, they have read the book from front to back probably several times. They've seen the Broadway play and the movies. So they're very knowledgeable about this book and delighted to share with us today. We have our moderator, Tanika Danley. Tamara Cofield, she's a panelist. And Shilda Ann Fairley is a panelist. And I'm going to turn it over to the moderator, Tanika Danley, and we're going to get started with our discussion.
Okay. In my defense, I broke my toe, so I'm in a boot, so I may sit periodically. I am living, but I'm so happy to have you guys here to share with us today to discuss The Color Purple. I must say that this was my first time reading the book from cover to cover, and there are so many nuances and details that were not depicted in the movie or the musical that I want to try to hit on today. I don't want to tell you everything, but if you have not read this book, please let me say, dive in. It is a page turner. It is cover to cover, interesting facts, and it's an emotional read. Let me say that. It has been eye-opening, and it has been a spiritual movement for me. Sarah Cofield and I have been sitting here bouncing ideas off of each other the entire time sitting here. So before we jump into the meat and potatoes of the discussion, let's do a little bit of trivia so that some of us who have not necessarily completed the book can jog our memories a bit, okay? So my first trivia question is, why does Celie initially write to God? And I'm gonna give you some multiple choice answers. I'm gonna make it easy. So is it to pray for forgiveness? Is it to prove that God does exist? Or is it to share her tragic story and to seek some type of understanding? So is it A, to pray for forgiveness, B, to prove that God does exist, or is it C, to share her tragic story and to seek some type of understanding? What do you guys think the answer is? Why is she writing to God?
B.
So who says B? We have a B up front. Who says C? The majority says C. The C's will win it. It is to share her tragic story and seek some type of understanding because she's confused about her plight in life at this point when the book opens, right? So if you think about it, she's a 14-year-old female who is now responsible for younger siblings. She is responsible for cooking, cleaning, running a household, and she's only 14 years old, and she's confused as to why. Why am I burdened with all these responsibilities on top of the fact that she's been raped by her father? Okay? So it's all of those emotions that she's dealing with on top of the fact that she has been sexually abused and assaulted. So question number 2, we'll dive into that in a minute. I see y'all ready. Question number 2. So Celia went so many years without hearing from Nettie. Why did she go so many years without hearing from Nettie? Before I give you choices, does anybody know right offhand what happened? Sarah McNabb.
So Wanda Robinson heard the book. Mr. was hiding the letters.
That is correct. He was hiding her letters, all the communication.
I knew that.
That was correct. You were right. He was hiding her letters, okay? Okay, so number 3. Celie made Suge a pair of pants. Now, how many of you know why she made those pants? Sorry, McNabb. Are you going to answer all the questions? Come on.
I'm up to page 200. Wanda. And the pants was made because her dress was dragging while she was in the field.
she was in the field,
Yeah.
in a dress,
In a dress.
right? Can you imagine how hard it is?
I got my
I didn't like to go to the fields in work boots in the pants that my granddaddy had for us. Imagine in a dress, a long, full dress, right? I complained in pants. Okay, number 3, we're gonna do a couple more of these and then we'll shift gears. Okay, so when we talk about Nettie, Celia's sister, we're gonna shift gears to Nettie. When she was in Africa with the Olinka tribe, why was she looked down upon? Why was she not respected as a person? We have to shift it.
Me?
Yes.
Because basically she was single and
That's
over there
exactly right.
with a married couple with kids.
Mm-hmm. So in Africa, with this tribe, not being married was looked upon as being disgraceful. You weren't seen as a woman. You didn't have really any value because you weren't bearing children. You weren't running a household. You weren't being looked after by a man. You know, no one saw any value in you. So she was looked upon as really nobody. Okay, let's do a couple of more. Sophia. Let's talk about Sophia. So she leaves prison, so she got arrested, and once she is released from prison, why does she still feel like she's still in prison, even though she's no longer behind bars? Why is that feeling? Yes, Sorority.
Okay. First of all, she said that she would never work for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to be released, she had to end up working, doing what she said she wasn't going to do. She had to work for.
Right, for the very person. For the very person who she refused to work for and got her in prison, right?
Right.
So that was a double fold, right? So you already didn't want to be a maid, and now you are a maid working for the very person who you refused to work for initially. So that in itself is emotional. That whole scene was it was jaw-dropping initially. It didn't read as powerful for me in the book though, as it did in the movie. I don't know about you. It didn't seem as real or as emotional for me in the book versus what I envisioned in the movie. Because while I was reading, I don't know if this happened with you, I was looking at the scenes in the movie and tying them into what I was reading. And I was reading in the characters' voices and I had a whole experience. Yes, did you want to
You
have
were
fun?
expecting the husband to walk, well, the gentleman to walk over and hit her in the club as in the movie. And when you didn't read that,
I did not.
It's like, okay, your mind went back to, that's not actually what happened.
Exactly. So it was less climatic for me, but nonetheless significant. Okay, so we already talked about Celia being an illiterate Georgia girl, and how her burdens were already very heavy because of what she had experienced. But what we didn't get a chance to see in the movie versus what was in the book was the relationship that her mother had with her father. So her mother's character was developed so much more clearly in the book versus what we actually saw in the text, right? So let's unpack that just a little bit before we dive into it. Okay, so the mom, she had mental health issues after her first husband died. Did we all get that clearly?
First husband was murdered.
He was murdered.
Traumatic.
He was lynched,
Yes, and
right?
burned.
He was lynched and burned. So that was a traumatic experience in itself, right?
Right.
Not only losing the husband, but the way he was lost, okay? And left her to fend, run a store, run a household, raise children, all alone, and that was a big burden to bear. So the stepfather came into town as a drifter, pretty much. He wasn't from around where they were from, and he kind of eyeballed her, is what I call it. What do you guys say?
Yeah.
It seemed to be like he was like, oh, she's right for the picking, and I'm gonna choose her. She had a business, she had a home, she was well-to-do. Why not have her? So when we get into the questions, the discussion questions, number one, does anybody have a copy? Okay, I Number one, let's talk about the relationships that we've seen. Some of the relationships that have been developed when we talk about the movie, in the book. Celie and Mr., let's start with them. Okay, so Celie refers to her husband as Mr., but Suge refers to him as Albert. So how does that make you ladies feel? I mean, so why is that, and how does that make you feel? Would you refer to your husband as Mr. and allow his other person?
She didn't know.
She didn't know.
She didn't know it.
There
There was no relationship, nothing to build upon, and he treated her as if she were property, right? There was no mutual respect. There was nothing to grow on. She came in and she did as she was told, and life was easier for her when she did that. Yes, ma'am.
Now remember that Mr. was just a man in church. Remember now, Mr. was just a man in church that she had seen, and I think he was eyeballing Nettie.
He was.
He wanted Nettie instead of her. But the stepdad, Alfonso, I think that's his name, Alfonso, you know, I'm gonna have to quote the movie that he said, no, he couldn't have her.
Right.
So that's why she started calling him Mr., because she really didn't know him, it just was that man in church.
Did you know?
Tanika,
Yes.
I think another part of that equation was
Uh-huh.
that she called him Mr. Because of the fact when he had to accept her instead of Nettie, the sole purpose was for her to come take care of his house.
Right.
That was her sole purpose. There was no love, there was no affection, no anything. She was simply somebody to come in and deal with them unruly kids that they had in that nasty house.
One day unruly, hit in the head with a rock. Made her bleed. And he ain't say nothing. Can you imagine? I can't. I cannot.
Now, you gotta remember that it's the 1900s.
See, that's why the law let me was born.
Amen.
The 1900s. That's the only way I can forgive all the stuff in the book. I said that happened a long time ago. And you know, in my mind, I thought, well, that's what things went back then. But it's like that, you know, it could be like that now.
Can I say something else? Because what Ann you just said, I'm gonna disagree with that because just bringing that to real life. Cause see, I think about my grandmama and my great grandmama, and the answer is still gonna be a resounding no. No. It just depends on that particular woman.
Yeah.
Right.
And what she willing to put up with.
Well, one of the things, I think you bring that out, Wanda, is we talk about Celie and Nettie, but they didn't, you ought to hear me with that. Yeah. You talk about Celie and Nettie, they didn't know that their stepfather was their stepfather. That was their father. That was the father figure, the only father figure they knew. So the relationship that young girls have with the men in their lives does set the tone. So the relationship that Celie did not have with her stepfather set the tone with her relationships with men. As you know, she continued through life because she didn't have someone who loved her and was the you know his princess that sat on the pedestal. So that relationship set the tone for relationships, and it didn't help that she had abusive men that she dealt with in that intimate relationship.
And that was further demonstrated by the fact that she would never, ever
Touch that
hold
belt.
her head up.
Or
She
hold her
always looked down at the ground until she got to that point when she realized she did not have to cower down like that.
Yeah. All right, when you should bring up relationships and what you said, that's why Celie ended up liking women. Because she was afraid of men, and they were so cruel to her, and she wasn't scared of women. In the book, it'll tell you that the stepdaddy slapped her about something she did in church, like winking in church. And he thought she was winking at a man. But she said, I never even looked at the men in church. She said, I looked at all the women. She said, I was looking at the women. And so that's what, when you say relationship, that's what started her relationship with women.
And the fact that her sister was the only person who ever loved her,
Sure.
that she knew of.
Right.
The only person. Now, just imagine getting up into your, and you didn't have anybody that you could point to that loved you.
As far as the man is concerned.
Period.
No, anybody.
Anybody. Nobody else.
But the women she met treated her nice and treated her kind.
Right.
So she liked women because of that.
But you know, those early relationships, it goes back to how you start.
Yeah.
And what you, and so those early relationships really
That's true.
impacted who she was and who she became.
Right.
And those were the same kind of relationships that made her flourish later.
Right.
You know,
And also mentioned in the book about how she and Nettie used to lie down together. So that came out in the book, but not in the movie.
right, because that's a protection. You know how you have something like, I don't know how, I used to suck my thumb,
Me too.
when I was a child. And so, you know, the way that you, the relaxation or whatever that thing is, so
Yeah.
holding another person, was a protective mechanism for her. And then her children, you know, I don't even know if she knew she was having children.
I don't know, I don't think
When,
so.
you know, cause she had that one so early and then we come in where she's having the second one. So, you know, she didn't even get to nurture, not at all, her children, because they were taken.
Right hand in the back.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing in all of this discussion, there's a name that has never come up for her dysfunction. It's the mother. That's where you're nurturing the mother. But I think the mother is where the nurturing starts.
Right.
So even in that abusive family dynamics of the stepfather, the mother played just as important of a role because she did not protect her children, and she was better off than some mothers are who have lost the husband, the father of the kids, because she had means by which to support her children. She gave those means up for a man who took control, but she was in a good place, except her emotional, personal, but she was in a good place to raise her kids and to support them and make this and supply their needs, but she gave it up for a man. And so we talk about the man and the men in her life and her sister, but I think it started with the mother.
I think it's a good point.
I don't think she was capable of taking care of her children.
Right.
Because of the things that she did after she learned her husband, when he was brought to the house and the condition that he was brought in. It was said that every day she prepared his food for him
Every day.
when he was there. She taught him. So it's things like we're dealing with now, mental illness, we didn't know it was happening back then. So she wasn't capable of taking care of her children. She didn't know how to do that.
Absolutely, which is why she was such a target for her stepfather to come in and take advantage of, because she was emotionally ill-equipped, mentally ill-equipped to handle it. Sorry, man.
So she was also identified as the one to cut hair. And it was so, a point in a place in their environment where you only cut hair in this particular area. And he was tempting in, the stepfather was tempting into that area where he shouldn't have been. But the mother kind of like looked away. And I think that's some of Celi's effect on her as well, because she didn't have that support from her mother to say, okay, you crossed the line, this is not where you come and get your hair cut.
Right.
You know, I think this started way back then too.
So when we talk about Celie and Nettie's relationship, as well as Suge, when we talk about their relationship, in some fashion, Suge actually replaced Nettie in Celia's life when they met, right? Because she took on the role as sister, mother, nurturer. I'm going to speak life into you by telling her she was pretty and attractive, and she in a lot of ways built her self-esteem where no one else ever took the time to do that in her life. When we talk about the abuse, we're gonna go back just a little bit. The abuse from her stepfather. She went into town, into the store, and a lady had a baby in the store, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And she looked at the baby and she said, I know that's her. I know that's her. Have you ever been there and you sitting somewhere and you're like, wow, I know that that's, you know, whatever it is you focusing on. She sold that baby name on the diapers. And she lifted the bottom up. You remember who she lifted the bottom up to see if Olivia was written on the bottom of the diapers. But what was it about that baby that cued her in to say that I know? Because she knew it was the baby as soon as she saw it, before she ever inspected her butt and looked at her. What was it about that baby that drew her in to say, I know that's my baby? Isn't that their maternal instinct? Their maternal instinct.
Because you can be in a space and there are 10 babies
You know your baby
and
crying.
they crying.
And you gonna
And you know the voice of your baby.
Absolutely.
Right? A mother, you may respond, right? You know, personal thing. I breastfed, right? So your body responds to things, right? But I always knew when it was my child, you cry versus anybody. And I think that's what connected her to it, is that spiritual, whatever you want to call it, that's connected to you.
Absolutely, I agree. So when we talk about, since we're on the very sensitive subject of this sexual abuse and the incest and the rape, those things have been manifested, and in a lot of ways we talk about them as generational curses. I know we've all heard that phrase, right, in that term, generational curses. How do those impact anyone, not just females, women and males too, as they develop and grow into the adult version of themselves? How do those experiences shape their mindset, their thought process, how they solve problems, how they move through life? How do those experiences help to direct or guide future experiences or encounters with abuse or with someone who may want to take advantage of a person? When you have such deep-rooted, I say evil, just for lack of a better word, hurt people, that's something that we were talking about earlier. When you come into contact with people who want to force themselves or create an environment where they are in control, how do those situations help shape and direct what you're going to do in the future? Do those people respond and cower in because it's something that they've experienced before? Does it become routine? Is it habit? Do we do it because we're female? Do we say, yes, I'm going to give in. I'm not going to fight back because I'm a female. I'm not supposed to be aggressive. I'm not supposed to be loud. I'm not supposed to raise my hand, even if somebody is coming to attack or hurt you.
I think Wanda mentioned about her grandmother, great grandmother, and the impact that knowing them in their later years, because we don't know exactly how they were in their early years. So, you know, because you have an evolution sometimes. If you live, you change.
Right.
And so sometimes those strong people may not have been as strong in the earlier time. And we look at the evolution of Celia's character and, you know, those characters and how they've changed. But I think it is fascinating to see the female relationships in the book and the male relationships in the book. We concentrate, I think I concentrated because I'm a female, on the female relationships. But it's interesting about the male relationships and what those dynamics did. And I think what happens sometimes is we pattern what we see, and we believe that whatever that is the way that we're supposed to be, or we try to imitate and emulate that relation, that vision of who we are or who we should be. And I think that's such an important lesson for us as just people. You never know who's looking at you. And you don't know what it is that they're picking up from you when they're observing you. So when we want to become role models or people who are important to other people to do the right thing, because sometimes we say it, but are we living it?
Right.
And so that's sort of something for us to, I mean, there's so many levels of different things that you can pick up from the book, but when you start to delve into, what were those relationships pattern for these characters, and how did that work? Because Nettie, you know, knew early on, she was the educational one. She was the one who was the learned one, probably that light, the learned one in the group, and what she always wanted to do. She always wanted to, she didn't want to be a mother or, you know, a wife. She wanted another kind of life. And so, same family dynamic, but was it? Because she was the little sister. And then she had Celie there, you know, and part of her nurturing was, I plan to be able to take care of you. That's what God put me here for. I can't have to, I'll be able to be here for you in our old age. I'll take care of that part of our family. So it's interesting about how relationships do that, I think.
And when we're speaking of relationship, another shift is the relationship between Nettie and Corinne. So, you know, Nettie looked to Corinne as to be almost like a mother figure or sister figure or however. But as Corinne started getting ill, her relationship with Nettie changed because the kids were getting bigger, the two kids, and they started to look like Nettie. So there were some doubts in Corinne's mind as to
Turn into a poison.
right, it actually did, because she actually thought she had a relationship with her husband, when it wasn't the case. So that relationship kind of shifts as well.
I want to go back to the relationship between Celie and Nettie.
Okay.
And I don't know if anybody else picked up on it, but after you said what you said tomorrow, Celie and Nettie were sisters, and the dynamics is that was, to me, Nettie was the pretty one. Celie was considered the ugly one. So therefore, things were done for Nettie that were not done for Celie. And I mean, you can bring it all the way up until today.
Right.
Those same type of dynamics exist. You know, in families, people, you know, they're gonna cater to the good, you know, the pretty one or the cute one or whatever. And the one that's homely looking or just downright ugly, you know, they, yeah.
To the question that I heard that was on the tape was about if something has happened, how do you deal with it later?
Right.
And does that carry over into your other, your lifetime relationships, right? So my thought on that is, we are women of today, and we are women that were born, except for Miss Gordine over there, in the 50s and after, right? And I think most of us are in that kind of age group, 67, I mean, the furthest you're going back, right? Not saying about you young folks, right? From the 60s and the 70s, we're talking about dynamic of women. We came up, we were raised during an era where we read, we have been taught about expressing your feelings, and it's okay, and not holding back when something happened. But women of that time no matter what happened, it was, what happens at home, stays at home. You don't tell nobody. I told you Uncle Johnny did this to me when I sat on his lap. Oh girl, you tell, excuse my French, you telling a lie, he wouldn't do that. And so parents were masking that for the children, so you never were allowed to express what had happened and how to deal with it. But today, we teach our children from the time they're old enough to walk and do. If somebody touch you, you tell me. No matter what they say they're gonna do to you, to me, I'm gonna kill your mama, I'm gonna beat her up. You tell me that me, but we are a different set of, not just parents, because some people here that don't have children, but we are a different mindset of women that says, protect your space, you know, the 3 feet distance. We teach that, but our foreparents, they didn't know.
Right.
And mothers were in a situation was, you have these kids, their parents told them, when you leave this house with Mr., you can't come back. I don't care what he do or don't do, you gonna stay over there with Mr. because you can't bring you and these kids back. Parents were forcing their daughters, and it was probably happening to boys, it just wasn't the focus of what we're talking about. They forced their children to live in abusive situations because you didn't have any place to go. You have 2, 3, 5, 10 kids. You gonna stay there, he can bring his mistress in the house and you sleeping on the sofa. And because mothers were teaching their kids and parents, when you getting married and have a baby, I'm finished with you. So we didn't have any, we women didn't have any place to go. So yes, to your question, I think it affected because you didn't have any coping mechanism.
Right.
And you were taught not to tell anybody. So what do? I don't want him to beat me up, I don't want him, so women just did what came to them.
So that speaks to my next point, the sacrifices that were made, and sorry for Bill and I were talking about. There were many sacrifices that not only did Celie made for Nettie in withstanding a lot of the abuse and the turmoil that she endured growing up, but also she sacrificed herself for her mom, for her mother, because she knew her mother was sick. She knew she was unable to care for her and her other siblings. So she endured the rape. She endured the abuse. She took on those responsibilities and allowed her stepfather to abuse and manipulate her to spare her mom. So when you think about that type of sacrifice, we can relate that so well to what we do for our families today, right? How many of us have sacrificed something or some part of ourselves to protect a baby or, you know, a child, a loved one, even a student who may or may not have the advocacy in place, right? How many times have we stood in the gap for those who have less than or don't have that person to reach and lean on? So when you reflect back on how Celie evolved throughout the book, those sacrifices also helped to shape her, just like the abuse, just like the relationships that she was building. The sacrifices that she made spoke a lot to her character, which is probably why a lot of people kept going to her for advice throughout the book, right? People kept going to her. Sophia, Harpo, they all wanted to know her opinion, right? Be it good or bad, because she gave some pretty strong advice to Harpo when she told him to hit Sophia, because that just went downhill and they never recovered. They never recovered when he said beat her. So what does that say to Celie's mindset, that her response to Harpo would be to hit his wife in order to make her comply? What does that say to her mindset and self-esteem, her self-value?
That's all
Exactly.
she did.
Exactly.
That was her norm.
Exactly. she had nothing else to glean from. She had no other well to draw from but from that one of pain and suffering. So if you want her to do what you say, Mr. He hit me, so I'm gonna tell you to hit her. That's how I comply. Because he hit her in the book. Mr. said he hit her because she was stubborn. You know, she had a stubborn streak, which many of us do. I know I do. I know I do. But I'm just. Yes, sir, madam.
So, when we're speaking of sacrifices, one of the big things I think I mentioned in our committee meeting that really stuck out was the sacrifice that Squeak made for Sophia that actually saved Sophia's life. Even though it took her out of prison to work as that maid that she didn't want to be, but it actually saved her life. And Squeak sacrificed some things in order to make that happen. That was not in the movie that I saw.
It was definitely not in the one that I saw.
Can you share those things?
Yeah, go ahead and share.
No, because you can
Since you
read
up to page 200.
So anyway, Squeak, from where she came from, her family trade was kind of mixed, and her father or uncle was well known, and they had, say, clout,
Yes.
you know, with the city. And so she was able to negotiate with the person, the well-known person that knew the mayor. But in order for her to get Sophia to the maid job, she had to sacrifice her life.
Herself.
She had to, okay, since you coming to me, what you gonna do for me? Type situation. And that never came out in the movie, that she actually slept with this man, which also was a family member.
It was
Right,
her uncle.
it was right, which is a family member. And then he went to the mayor to get Sophia from out of prison into the main job.
Absolutely.
And that was
Yes.
the
I see it in there.
I want to piggyback on what you said, it's just a story because that was asked. I like how they came together as a family to see who was best fit to go
And
to
they
the jail, to see how they can get her out. And she was very quiet initially, but something came up, don't you know? And she was like, well, yes, we're related. And that's how she actually went. She didn't want to go. She asked them, what do I say? How do I act? How do I dress? And when they came together, they got her organized to go.
fixed her up, but
But not knowing that she would have to make a sacrifice. Yeah. So that was a real good point, how family comes together. Right.
Absolutely. To discuss.
Yes, yes.
And it still speaks to that relationship, because she had to be willing to make that sacrifice. Cause she could've just walked out.
Right.
But there was something about the dynamics, you know, everybody loved Suge. Everybody, could appreciate Suge for the talents that she brought to the table, and she was so forceful with it. But she had one of the most misunderstood relationships in her own family. You know, because of her love of Albert. You know, she was willing to do what she was gonna do with Albert, and you know, everything take care of itself, and she didn't care anything about Albert's wife.
And I'm on.
At all, you know. But when you look at that whole relationship dynamic, it is a theme throughout. What are you willing to do for this?
Suge also brought her out, Squeaky out, to call me by my name. My name is not Squeaky, call me Mary.
Mary. Respect. Respect the name.
Respecting the name.
So again, it's those sister type relationships the relationships that I feel like are so important as well in today's life. You have to have someone that you can talk to and relate to. Someone who will pour into you and feed into you, right? Because outside of your romantic relationship, because those other relationships also help to develop your character and help you create your own foundation and your own self-worth and self-esteem so that you may pour into others. So when we talk about squeak, since we're on the subject of squeak, those of you who have not read the book, there are some very interesting details related to squeak in the book. I don't want to tell you all of them because I want you to read the book. But let me just say, Squeak's character has some turns, honey, that you will enjoy. Okay? So please, I'm telling you, the book is it's some chewing morsels in there that you don't see coming. With her relationship with Grady, y'all know who Grady is, right? That was Suge's husband. Oh, Squeak, honey. Yes. Squeak. Suge got married. She got married. I's married now. I's married.
She married him because he was looking at her, and she decided to get married because Albert was already married to Celia. So, but Suge was always in love with Albert.
Always to the point of where, should I tell him?
Well, she had 3 kids for him.
She had, you said, Suge had 3 children for Albert. 3.
And that's why she called him by his name.
That's why she called him Albert. And Celia called him Mr.
Yeah.
She knew him.
She knew
their
it.
relationship.
They had 3 children.
But they thought she wasn't good enough to
Yeah.
Right.
And Albert, that speaks to Albert.
That's their relationship.
That speaks to Albert's relationship with his father.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, you know, when you look at Albert or Mr. and his relationship with his father got him in a lot of well of trouble.
In a line.
You know, he wasn't allowed to marry the woman he loved, which caused him to marry another woman who left
And cheated.
and
Got shot.
and was killed, And then Suge, of course, became the one-time woman because she was a PK, preacher's child, and had all them children. Preacher's kid. PK. So, you know, when you look at what those relationships, and he was a weak man.
He was. Wasn't he
You know,
weak?
Mr. was weak. And so, to make up for that being a weak man or considered a weak man, he used his fist. He was gonna beat Celia into, submission. So when you look at what those relationships do to who people become and what they do, it's really fascinating.
So speaking to this weak man, Albert, he hid those letters from Nettie. He told Celia, "Don't touch this mailbox. I got it fixed." You know, that's not in the book, but that's what he said. I got it fixed, so I'm gonna know if you touch it. And she never touched it. Okay. So, what does that say to his control issues? Because if he was to allow her to continue to contact her sister, would he have ever broken her stubborn streak? Would he have ever got her to comply the way that he wanted her to? Would he have ever run his house the way that he saw fit, right? Yes.
But I think if everybody really thought about Mr. was doing the sealing what his father did to him. And so now Mr. is in what he think he's in control. And that's all that does. He think he's in control. He tell her what to do, when to do, how to do it. And that's what his father did to him in each one of the relationships that he was involved in with those women.
Right. So when the dad comes to visit and he asks for a drink of water.
She's spitting.
She was listening through the window and she heard the conversation, the back and forth. And she took Mr. side. She defended her abuser. Classic Stockholm syndrome. Y'all heard of Stockholm?
Yes.
Classic Stockholm syndrome. You start to love and care for your abuser, right? So she spit in the water, and he guzzled it down like it was the best thing on earth. And she said she was gonna put some sugar cane repeat
Next
next
time.
time. See how they like that. You know, she was very content with herself by spitting in that water. That really made her feel as if she had conquered something, right?
And then he apologized to her when he left. But I don't think he meant it.
Right. He did say something. I don't know many women allow their husband
To bring her.
Lay up in
woman to lay up in their house.
Really,
I have a question.
The beginning of the book, from what I remember, it looked like, and I still have to continue reading to get a better understanding, but it looked like when even before Sugar Avery physically came into the home, when Celie had photos of Sugar Avery and was doting on her, like, well, that's the type of woman that I want to be like, and saw how beautiful she was and everything, and knew that Albert, or Mr., before she knew his name was Albert, was doting on Suge just in the physical sense. Suge already had, Celie already had in her mind that she was gonna, like, whenever Suge Avery came to the house, was gonna use her to come in and get Albert's attention and take the attention away from Celie, because she's already being daily abused and she's just trying to survive at this point. So she wants as much attention off of her being abused as possible. Mr's attention is focused on Suge Avery. Then she can at least try to find a way to at least hide, or at least try to find some way to even cope, or maybe find a letter. Like, that was my understanding from at least the beginning of the book.
Yeah, and that's a really good point.
I have a question. For those of you who haven't read the book, do you mind spoilers? I mean, do you mind spoilers about the book and some of the details being shared? Okay, I just wanted for those that didn't read the book, so go ahead.
But I must say it's a must read even after today.
Right.
Everything
I'm certain for those who haven't read the book, even if you hear some of these facts, I know that you're gonna be encouraged to read it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's a good point. And to that point, I think I want to jump a little bit ahead, because having had the incarnations of The Color Purple from reading it as a teenager and then seeing the movie just in college. I was in college when the movie finally came out. I was like, you know, where I never expected it to become a movie. Yeah, it was there. I know. Be a movie. I hadn't seen a movie like that, you know, before. You know, but having had that experience and then seeing that first Broadway incarnation, right, which brought it back to the book more than the movie for me. And then to see the musical, the second, because the Broadway show was a musical, yeah, but not really. The second musical was really, it mirrored the book more than the first two incarnations at all. So that's why I think it'll be interesting to see how the upcoming movies will change, because every portion of it brought a different portion of the book forward. And so different things that we took from reading the book, you didn't see it till 20, 25 years later.
Right.
Because it wasn't spotlighted. And the only reason I knew that that was the case, having had the first experience, when I saw the Broadway production with the original cast, yes, it was exciting. But one of my line sisters was with me, and she was like, well, how did they have that kind of relationship? And I said, you never read the book. Because there are a lot of letters when Celie stopped writing to God.
Oh, yes.
That she talked about her attraction to Sugar Avery. It happened long before Sugar Avery showed up at her doorstep.
Pictures, that picture dropped out of Alice, and she picked it up and seen it.
So that was a really big part of the book that was never explored in the movie.
Yeah.
And if you go back and listen to Steven Spielberg, you can understand. And having been in the industry, you can understand why some things were played down. Because we would have never seen it. Like I told you, I didn't expect to see a movie. Really, because that seemed to be so prevalent. But having of that portion that, was such a large part. But my line sister didn't even catch it a little bit because she thought the peck that you saw in the movie was it. She never read the book. Or she hadn't read the book at that point. But the peck that she saw, it was just a friendly. They were close friends. So it never occurred to her. And then we were riding back on the train and she said, when did they? And so I got her a copy of the book. So that I do want to encourage. And it was really important for us when we were talking in the Arts and Letters Committee meeting for us to explore during National Book Club, the National Books Month, the writing. Because I think it's really important for us to think about, how many of you journal? Anybody keep a diary? Anybody ever kept a diary? Because the president. Well, right now I think it's sort of interesting because I think the art of writing is being eroded.
Yes. It is.
We don't write anymore. We don't write letters. We hardly write checks. We don't write anymore.
Write letters for that matter. Or write letters for that matter.
Right, that's it. Letters really, it's really important. But it's so, for those people, text, and then that's not writing, because boy, if you ever go back and read some of those texts, you have not written what you want to do. We voice text, that's right, we don't write. But it's an interesting exercise if you ever kept a diary or if you journal, to go back and visit that. Because Tanika and I were talking about how the evolution of people go about happening on a daily basis from 1 week or 10 years. If you go back and read something then and maybe it's your aspirations, I want to do this, this, and this, or I want to have this accomplished or do whatever, and you go back and visit and go, I can't even remember wanting to do that, or I never pursued this, or check, did that, or whatever the case is. But it's interesting to compare who you are compared to where you were, or what you thought of yourself then. You might have been the same person, and it goes back to people watching you and doing whatever. You may have been the same person, but you didn't see yourself that way.
Right.
You wouldn't have, if somebody had you to describe yourself, you would go, I was this, I was shy, I was this. Like, go back to your high school yearbook and see what your friends wrote in it.
Right. Yeah.
You ever do that?
I do. Coming to reunion time.
Come up to reunion time and do that. And so, I was amazed that people thought I was funny. Because in my mind, I was always shy when I was in school. Shut up. But really, when I tell people I'm a natural introvert, on all my briars, all my tests, I'm an introvert. Okay, see? So when I started work at the Shakespeare Festival, part of my job had to be a more vocal person. And I had to be more of an extrovert to try to bring people in because they needed to get excited about what I was talking about and doing whatever. So in my private time, I would go home and read and not get on the phone and do this because that was what was more comfortable for me. And I always considered that other part work because that's what I had to do for work. So it was interesting to go back and start looking at things that people saying, oh, you're so funny and blah, blah, blah. And I was going, I wonder who they were looking at. But just imagine Celie going back to her letters. And you know, she could have almost because Nettie never got letters from her. And she never received Nettie's letters until Suge found them and showed them to her. So imagine catching up for the long period of time, reading what was going on here. And the importance of, she started out in faith, with her letters to God, and then she ended up, because at one point, you know, she was like, you're not God, you took my sister away, you took the one person who loved me away. So what kind of God are you, right? And then she ended up in God. So if there's a spirituality to The Color Purple, that is kind of a subtext or undertone in it that, you know, sometimes you wouldn't get, and movie makers probably wouldn't spend a lot of time talking about that either. But that was one of the things that I thought was just amazing.
You see the hand? Okay.
Yeah, so to go along with what, Mara said, is in a book, they have to make you see.
Right.
So you're gonna get more words, more detail.
Right.
And so the beauty of it is when you read it, then you go and you can kind of piece together the words, but you're never gonna get a 200 pages or 500-page book in a movie, right?
Yeah.
And so just the other day, I heard Oprah say that she made $35,000, I think it was, for that movie, when she did the first one. And she said that was the best money she made because it propelled it into other things and came about, because you would think that she made a lot of money, right? So when I saw the movie, 80 whatever it was, I was stationed in Europe. I was in Belgium, and we came home for a visit or whatever. And my niece in Washington, D.C. said, oh, we're going to take you to see this movie, Color Purple. I cried the whole movie. I was mad. I could not watch it again with Glover in it ever. It did so many emotions to me as a young woman, you know? And so I think the movie really have a lot of realistic things that are happening within. And I say all women, but we're among us. So for black women, a lot of this stuff still happens today, and we don't have an outlet to let it be expressed, because even in this room, and younger women too, have been taught to suppress those feelings and not share each other's stories, because there is a shame attached to the victim, as if it's the victim's fault. And it's not. When I look at the movie, read this, it's about victimization of a woman. You know, and it all comes back to that. And even though some things happen with the male child too, which caused the male child to perpetuate whatever happened to them, so you keep the cycle going. The women are shamed, and the men are taught this is what you do. So when you look at it, it has a lot of sadness to it as a whole, and to know that it is still happening right this moment while we are sitting here expressing what we got out of each piece, but from a different, you know, at a different level. There's a lot of this still going on, and it is heartbreaking.
And to add on to that too, I thought you was gonna hit on the fact, because it's like you saying, it's going on today. Which is the reason why we work with the Exodus community. It's a prime example of the exact same thing going on now that was going on back then.
So since we are, we're wrapping up because we have to be done in a few minutes. Let's just shift gears really fast and talk a little bit about the redemption theme of the book. Because there are aspects in the book that touch on, we've talked about Celie's character being developed, Nettie's character, Mr. and Suge. And Sarah Cofield and I were discussing how later on in the book, Mr. and Celie actually become companions. They actually become friends. They actually sew together and they share life events and they receive what each other is giving. You know, which is a completely different shift in a polar opposite of the way the relationship began, right? So just to see that happen was a huge surprise to me because again, this was my first time reading the book, so I was definitely into it. But that shift, once we realized that we can learn even from those who have wronged us, even from those who have mistreated us, that there's still a lesson, there is still some value in those experiences that we can take and move forward. I think that was the greater theme of the book in itself, is the theme of redemption. What did you want? I know you had some views that you wanted to speak on redemption, but does anybody have anything in particular from the book that they wanted to point out?
I did, and I'm glad we're coming towards the end because it was so much of joy.
It was.
And throughout the book, even from the beginning, when she said, "Dear God," and to the end, she kept her faith. Even though a couple of times, you know, she was like, no, but she kept her faith. But at the end, the beauty that she even recognized from the trees, the flowers, the love that she received. She didn't know, even from her mother, that her mother had, until the end of the book, that she was blessed with a home she had visited and said it was for the whites and not the blacks. It became her own home. And also with Nellie return, it was the everything. Right. It was the 4th of July celebration of the coming home. But it was everybody. Suge came, this one came, that one came, and they were all together. Right. Even though it was hardships, it was misunderstandings, it was abuse, it was neglect, it was all of these things, but at the end it was joy. And some of them same people who had abused each other had come together to show love. Right. Because at that point they had together understanding of each other and how to live. But my main point, did you all realize Mr. asked Celie to marry him. He affection. When before, you know, he knew it wasn't there. She definitely knew it was not there. But at the end, he said it would be different. And she said, and I loved it. No.
No, thank you.
No,
She would have married me. Because he was very impressed by her business. She had turned her sewing into a business, a profitable business. And he said, wow, you made money. Like, he was impressed by all of the things that she was able to do in spite of the thing was. Right. The person that she became, right. This was all in your house. The whole time. And you over there acting crazy. See, you doing what you want to do, listening to your dad.
He had to keep her down.
He did to make himself
could never nobody would ever want to be ugly. And everything he did tried to steal her self-esteem. Right. And he did that. Absolutely. And should help her to develop her.
Absolutely.
Come out of there.
Everybody remembers the curse. Until you do right by me. You got hold of it. Everybody knows the curse. But there were a few lessons that I sort of took and sort of playing what Audrey said. The first thing was the lowest points of life will make you stronger. Yes. And so it's just one of those things. Hold on. because what's going on right now that's holding you down, one more day.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important message, because we're finding more and more young people and people of color who we would have never expected, who opt out too early.
Way too early.
Way too early.
They do self-harm because they think that this momentary thing is something that's gonna be permanent, and they make it permanent by doing it that way. So that was an important message. One of the points was love is hard.
Yes, it is.
Love is hard. And so I think everybody can take that, in just that simple thing. Love is hard.
It is.
There is a song from the musical, Hell No. And it's all of the sisters. We got the music up here. All of the sisters who are coming to move Sophia out after Harpo got stupid. And so the message was a man should never hit a woman. In their experience, it was a bunch of sisters, and they were like, "What you say? He did? Hell no!
Right.
We leaving. We coming to get you. We gonna pack you up," and they moved her out. And so I thought that was a real impressive thing. And then the fourth lesson was never forget your place on earth.
Right.
We all have purpose. Never forget that you have a purpose. You may not have found your purpose yet, but you got one.
You have one. Right.
At least one. So never forget, and just hold that with Celia's thought. I see.
I just want, before we close, the color purple. What do you think the meaning of the color purple? What? I'm trying to get my question together.
Okay, I think I might
hit
that.
Name it the color
purple. All right, I'm gonna get through these 6 lessons, and then I'm gonna touch on that a little bit. Okay. So the 5th point, we just stopped on everybody has a purpose. Okay. The 5th point, Audrey mentioned it earlier. Don't lose faith.
True.
Don't lose faith. Start it with God. End it with God. Amen. Never lose faith. And then the 6th point, and Wanda talked about this with the pork chop tied around the neck. If you don't think so, nobody will. You are beautiful. Amen. You are beautiful. And there's a wonderful song that Celia does. I'm Here. We've all heard Fantasia do it, and the other. That's one of the signature songs of the musical. You are beautiful, and when you recognize it, I think other people start to recognize it.
Right.
But you have to recognize it first. Now, getting to the color purple, I thought about that a lot. Why the color purple? When we look at what the color purple stands for. Royalty. Wealth. Luxury.
Yes.
But here was a term I did not realize the color purple represents. Spiritualism. It was new to me. I was like, really? Okay. Creativity.
What about
That Kathy just mentioned forgiveness. I have forgiveness as one of my key points about talking, but the color purple is not recognized for forgiveness. It's not tied to the color. I think the color for forgiveness might have been blue. It was a color that was interesting, and I didn't realize it. But the other thing after creativity was mystery.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Mystery. And then the last image that the color purple is associated with is magical. Now, if you take those terms and think about this book, I think it hit all of those things that's associated with the color purple, which may have been what Alice Walker wanted when she chose that color.
Okay.
But the line from the movie and That's right. And from the play, they have a discussion about the color purple. And I think the color purple is one of those you don't see in nature as much as you do other things, green, those things, and yellows and reds. And when you see it, and the line says, if you see the color purple and you pass by it without noticing what it is, that pisses God off. Because it has all of these elements that you can pull from it. That's my take on it. Nobody special, but I think if you each pull one of those elements or two of those elements out and think about it in your life, and think about what you gain from it, those are some of the things you might gain from this book.
That's a point I wanna make, thank you. Two things that you just hit on. We'll talk about this color purple. It is interesting to me now that you gave these meanings, that this month, we, and I say celebrate, but it's not celebration. We recognize domestic violence, and the color is purple. So it ties to this book, right, about the abuse, because it was really centered around abuse and other things came out of it. But also, what I see in this book is God will reach out to you without it coming from somebody else. Because I don't see the spirituality of you went to church every Sunday and you knew about God, but Celie had this connection to God, writing the letters. So I think that God can reach the children, the people. He will put stuff into your spirit, man, to connect you to Him without it coming from your outside influences. It's really in the spirit that's in you. And so she had this relationship with Him. That's not because she was taught to have one with Him. And then when she, for whatever reason, you believe, right? And then it's not happening, so that's what we do, right? When we ask God for something, we really meant I wanted it yesterday before I asked you, right? And so He doesn't work like that. So I see in this whole thing, she was really connected to God from within side, without outside.
Yeah, I think you really hit it there, because I think our relationship with God is innate. And it is, there's a song, okay, I'm gonna make y'all go get the music, that talks about that connection. Because, you know, we listen to God here and here. It's not coming from a person. It's coming from God to you. You know, if you want to know an answer, just sit still. You know, I used to hear my mom and dad, you know, say stuff like that. It's like, well, how long I gotta sit here before the answer comes? But sitting still, you can get quiet, and you can hear what it is you need to you know, glean from whatever's going on. So it is a really good question at point. Thank you.
What is it? He's a long time God.
Yes, he is.
I've been ready.
So if you have not picked up your copy of The Color Purple, I highly suggest that you do. We have some extra copies in the back of the different covers that have evolved through the years. We only have 3 copies, I think, but there's an original of Celie in the rocking chair on the cover of the very first copy of The Color Purple. And we have some of the other copies, the covers that have come through the years. So if you want to take a look, be my guest. Thank you guys so much for coming and participating. We have enjoyed you immensely. I have. And I look forward